Yes guys, welcome back to another video. Welcome to the George Benson Football Channel for a Chelsea news video / speculation news. The transfer window is officially closed. It's been closed now for nearly a week. However, whenever there's Chelsea, whenever there's news, there's always going to be something coming up. And today, I want to talk about one kind of fantasy story that actually has a bit of legs based off of the backbone of another story that I want to discuss regarding Leroy Sane, Thomas Tuchel liking Leroy Sane, and the proposed January transfer window move for the player with one of Hakim Ziyech, Christian Pulisic, or Callum Hudson-Odoi going the other direction. Before we get into anything though, the Premier League is back this week. Chelsea got Aston Villa. That means GBFC daily videos are officially back. So make sure you are subscribed, and if you could, hit the like button on today's video. Before we get into anything, it is time to talk about, I thought we were going to have a little break from this, to be honest. I thought the transfer window closing, the craziest transfer window in living memory. It really was. It was sensational on pretty much every single front. The two biggest players in the world, the biggest names the sport has ever created, both decided to just, do something a bit different. And Chelsea signed Romelu Lukaku. We also signed Marcus Bettinelli and Saul Niguez. But the talk is now that Chelsea want to push for Leroy Sane, who's not really had the best of times in Bavaria since he signed for Bayern Munich. Everybody thought it was kind of a match made in heaven. I think he's only scored about 6 goals, which isn't the worst stat in the world, but it's also, for a player of his quality, at this stage of his career, nowhere near good enough. 6 goals, Leroy Sane in a Bayern Munich team that score 5 or 6 every other week. It isn't good enough. Thomas Tuchel is apparently a big admirer of the player. See, the issue I have with this is at the moment, and we'll later on get onto this in the video, when we talk about another winger that Chelsea are kind of being linked with again, but it's all just a little bit obvious. But with Leroy Sane, if Chelsea don't want to play with wingers, out-and-out wingers, which at the moment, I think it's very difficult to say that we're playing with wingers. We've got 3 attackers, and I think everyone's pretty set at the moment, and in tomorrow's video I'm going to discuss this further. Everyone's pretty set on the trio of Romelu Lukaku, Mason Mount and Kai Havertz. And then you've got 3 players in particular, or you could say 4 players in particular, and I'm surprised that Timo Werner isn't being linked as part of this move for Leroy Sane, because you've got Ziyech, Callum Hudson-Odoi and Christian Pulisic, who are being touted as the names of players that can go the other way in order for Leroy Sane to sign for Chelsea. Now, before we get into whether or not I think Sane is a good player, whether I think Chelsea should even consider signing Leroy Sane, I think it's important to understand that with Chelsea already having really top quality wingers at the club, Callum Hudson-Odoi is naturally a left winger. He can't even get a sniff in his favoured position, and if Callum Hudson-Odoi wants to play football for Chelsea, it's when we need him at right wing back potentially, or right wing, if he's very, very lucky to play in his favoured role. Hakim Ziyech, I think there is definitely something with Ziyech that we will see now that he's coming back from that injury. At the Super Cup, it looked to me as though he was nailed on to begin the Premier League season, starting under Thomas Tuchel. But I do think with Hakim Ziyech kind of being best in a number 10 role, I think it's very difficult for him to break through the Mason Mount, Kai Havertz duo behind Romelu Lukaku. And that isn't anything against the quality that Hakim Ziyech brings to the team. I think there's not many players in world football that have a left foot that could be as sweet tasting and as magical as Hakim Ziyech, whether it's in a Chelsea shirt, what we've seen for Ajax, Morocco, whatever. So the fact he can't get in the team, Callum Hudson-Odoi can't get in the team, that is one thing. Then you've got Captain America, who is arguably, on his day, one of the most electrifying wingers in football at the age that he's at right now. Christian Pulisic is a top-class player, but in this Chelsea team, he's going to struggle to get in. And I think that any link that we might have for Leroy Sane, the reason that I can't buy into it and believe in it too much is because I don't think the lack of game time for a Pulisic, Ziyech or a Hudson-Odoi has anything to do with what they could potentially do for the Chelsea team. I simply think that any link to any winger goes a little bit over my head because Chelsea don't need any more wingers. And I think that going in for Bayern Munich, yes, maybe it's a move where Chelsea gets Sane, who Thomas Tuchel specifically likes the player. I think that is the key thing here, which kind of does give this a little bit of legs. But to give up on Christian Pulisic, I think would be absolutely ludicrous. Hudson-Odoi, as an option, that makes sense because he wants to play football, and for whatever reason, Thomas Tuchel isn't giving him that time, whether that is a personal thing towards Callum Hudson-Odoi, which I don't believe, because Tuchel praised him a lot during pre-season, but he hasn't featured a single minute of Premier League football in the opening 3 games. With Hakim Ziyech, I can also understand because Ziyech will want to be playing, he deserves to be playing, and under this Tuchel system, he might not be the best option for what Thomas Tuchel wants. Now, Leroy Sane is a top quality player, but again, I do believe that it is something that is really surplus to requirements right now at Chelsea. And I think in terms of Leroy Sane trying to get his career back to a point where when he left Manchester City, Bayern Munich, I thought, was snapping up one of the signings of that window when they signed him. I think him being German, going back to Germany, the quality he showed at Manchester City, I was very surprised that City let him go, even though for him there it was a case of, again, how did he get in the team? I think it would be the same if he was to sign for Chelsea. Whether one of those players or 2 of those players even leave or not, the 3 mentioned, Ziyech, Pulisic, Hudson-Odoi, or even Werner, you could throw into that equation as well, I just don't think it's a move that favours Leroy Sane. I don't see Chelsea changing the way that we're playing at the moment in order to accommodate Leroy Sane. And then what? You lose Mason Mount, who's one of the best young players in the world. Kai Havertz, the same for him. I think it's a tough one. To me, it doesn't make much sense. I think the only thing in my mind that gives this story some legs to the rumour is that Tuchel likes Leroy Sane. I mean, who bloody doesn't? And you've also, within that group of 3, got 2 players who I think will certainly consider a move to Bayern Munich in order to get more game time. So, that being said, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below as to whether you think Chelsea going in for Leroy Sane is a good idea, a feasible option, and even a likely option at that. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. But the second one that I want to talk about today is the Belgian link-up that we've seen. You guys can see it in the title. It's one that every time it gets touted, every time it gets rumoured, I have to talk about it, you know, because there's always that wonderful affiliation that Chelsea fans will have for the quite magnificent Eden Hazard. This year, he seems to have come back to Real Madrid. He's fit, he's fighting, he's ready to go and actually win trophies at Real Madrid after they missed out to Atletico last year. And Eden Hazard would be very disappointed, I think, with the career that he's had so far since he left Chelsea. And there were times in the Belgium game where, first things first, Romelu Lukaku, 50 goals in his last 50 games, his 100th appearance for Belgium, and of course he gets himself a goal. Congratulations to Chelsea's number 9. But they look so good together, don't they? In terms of that footballing link-up, Eden Hazard to Romelu Lukaku, Lukaku finishes it off. Now, the reason I'm talking about this is because the story that we just mentioned, we're talking there about 2 or 3 young players. Hakim Ziyech is obviously not as old as Hazard too. We're talking about younger players who might actually be interested in a move away from Chelsea because their game time under Thomas Tuchel may not be exactly what they're after or what they need at this stage in their career. With Leroy Sane, the reason I think that one might not be the best option in terms of logically both players and the deals and the 2 clubs come to a solution is because I don't see Leroy Sane playing every single match in this Chelsea team either. However, one thing that we could well see in the future is if the Pulisics, the Hudson-Odois, the Ziyechs of this world decide, you know what, as much as I love this football club, I'm a European champion here, we're challenging for everything, but me personally, I'm not quite getting enough game time. They push for a move away, I think, particularly with Callum Hudson-Odoi. In the next 2 windows, if his game time doesn't improve, I think he's gone. Whether I want that to be the case or not is irrelevant. I think it's going to happen. So, it might well open the door for a future move for a Chelsea legend who's getting older and older and older, who still has so much to offer for Eden Hazard. Now, the reason I wanted to talk about this today is because I know a lot of people who were very against Hazard coming back to Chelsea when the links appeared at the beginning of last summer. A lot of people say he's past it, we shouldn't be looking back on old players, potentially tarnishing their reputation at Chelsea because they're not as good now as they once were. I think with Eden Hazard, it might simply be a case of the Real Madrid move, the lack of love, whatever it may be, just might have got to Eden Hazard. And this season, if we see the Hazard that we all know exists, that we saw for Belgium in their last international game, is it possible? And I'm not saying either way that I want this to happen or I think it will happen. I want to put it to the floor for you guys here. The rumours are coming out again because of that Hazard-Lukaku link-up for Belgium. Is it feasible for Eden Hazard to ever return to Chelsea to play with Romelu Lukaku and bring to life in club football that Belgian connection? Are we just getting a bit too romantic about this one? Or, like I mentioned earlier, with Pulisic, Hudson-Odoi, Ziyech, these kind of players who are obviously top quality in the Chelsea squad, if one or two of these players push for a move, if the right minutes aren't given to them, it would see Chelsea looking for another winger. Now, I want to also leave it to you guys in the comments to say Leroy Sane or Eden Hazard. I think that one is a very, very interesting one indeed. I, at this point, would be on the side of favouring an Eden Hazard move over a Sane move, just because it's Eden Hazard. And I know that is just very bad footballing logic, but he is still a top quality player. Injuries, no injuries, age going up or not, still a top class player. Leroy Sane, I think he would just become another one of those names in the pot of names complaining about not getting enough minutes and being better footballers than their minutes suggest. I hope that one has clarified that as much as I possibly can for each and every one of you. Let me know your thoughts on both of these players, Sane, Hazard, which players would make way if Chelsea were in fact to go for one of these in the future. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. It's been a pretty quiet last couple of weeks because laptop issues, transfer window closing, lack of news. Football is back now. I'm back now. No more missing things. I'll catch you guys later. Come on, you Blues.